when you have anger in your heart, thoughts, minds, or resentment, or whatever it is, you're the only one feeling it. It's counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. Being angry and holding on to resentment and all those thoughts when they don't feel them.
Yeah.
Especially if it's somebody that you don't even see anymore because of whatever happened between you, whatever the case may be. If you're not seeing that person, you can't express your feelings toward them, and you can't do it, so you just gotta let it go. Forgive them.
Hi, Lindas.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I love being called the Linda. That's so much fun.
Just a couple of Lindas.
Just welcome to a couple of Lindas, because we're all just a bunch of Lindas out here trying to figure out and navigate this whole life thing. Failing every so often, but, picking ourselves back up, because that's what you do. With me today, of course, is friend of the podcast, Matt.
Hi.
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 And we have our special guest, Mary, who is a dear friend and yoga instructor who is actually working on opening her own yoga studio.
I am. It is exciting and terrifying every moment of the day. I go vacillating between both, back and forth. But it's exciting.
Good.
Sometimes you talk about it. Life takes you in places you didn't ever actually expect to go.
Yeah, no kidding.
When life was what happens while you're making other plans. Isn't that what Mr. Lennon said, I think? John Lennon, that is. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your week. How's your week been? I tell you, it's been one of those weeks. I don't know if you guys have them out there in podcast land, but everything seemed just more complicated than it needed to be. Like if I needed to take 10 steps to take somewhere, it took me 47. So I don't know, but I'm lovely. None of that is bad. Just a pet peeve. Something that is just slightly annoying. I've been lovely, though. It is a beautiful day, and we're turning fall here in the beautiful Cookeville, Tennessee.
Yes.
How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. My weeks these days are pretty, simple, I guess you could say. It's been a good week. I've not had that whole, like whenever something is always going wrong, everybody's like, oh my God, Mercury's in retrograde. So, knock on wood, I haven't necessarily had that. It's just been, I guess, realizing how, I'm getting up there in age. I can't party like I used to.
Shocking.
So, coming to terms with that. I was talking to Matt earlier about our weekends and just how it was just so chock full of events and all that, and we were just not able to do all of them.
No, I missed the after party, which is not like me.
That's not like you at all.
Speaking of getting up there in age, but you got to give your liver a break, whatever.
I mean,
I've heard that.
So
But
they say.
Isn't that against the whole point of two Lindas? I think the liver should be engaged and not on a break at every moment.
Consider mine engaged.
Engage. Activate. So, all right, tell me, what is making you happy this week?
Well, I tell you what's making me happy. The Great British Baking Show.
Yeah?
Please tell me you folks have seen it. Have you seen it?
Total fail on my part. I have not watched it.
Oh my gosh.
Season 1.
I
was all the way through it.
Oh, it is just so... First off, it may simply because I have a thing for British accents, like I turned my Siri into British, and I guess I must just sort of have a thing. But it's so much fun to listen to them, and they're not very mean. Like the most they say is, oh, your sponge, it's a little dry. It's just so joyful, and it's really cool what they do, and watching it, I really enjoy it. It's my new binge watch.
Yeah.
And it's very, you don't have to think. There's no thinking. It's not historical. There's not an intense storyline. It's not like watching Game of Thrones where you have to go, now, what's that guy's name again? All right, now, who was he to them? It's just like, oh, look, they made a sponge. Oh, look. When I watched it today, they were making creme brulee. Oh.
Really lovely. Well done.
Oh, well done. Oh, I know they say well done. I'm trying to incorporate that into my life now. Well done, Desiree.
Well done. Oh, that kind of
That's
sounded...
my current thing that makes me happy.
That sounded sexy. Matt, what's making you happy this week?
I've been revisiting the Glee soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. Specifically the Grease episode and their cover of Summer Nights and You're the One That I Want is what I want. in my life this week, apparently. I don't want to talk about how many of the 19 million views I'm responsible for on YouTube, but suffice to say, it's a significant number, and I can't get enough because it makes me happy right in the heart. And I would like to reiterate that those people who did that show were doing God's work, because there are a lot of people of a certain generation that wouldn't know songs.
Yeah.
What a good point.
That, I talk to kids, or, which could be anybody to me anymore, and talk about a song. Oh, yes, I saw that on Glee. Right. Well, actually, Queen or Barbra Streisand or AC/DC or Olivia Newton-John was originally responsible, but I'm glad you know.
Yes.
At least you know.
At least
Right.
you've heard of it. And don't give me that blank stare when I mention a song.
I mean, so that's that, and the voice of Amber Riley on that show, who played Mercedes Jones. If you don't know, take some time, because what a talent. So that's making me happy.
And she's had some success on Broadway since the show, right?
I think she went to London and did did Dreamgirls, because she had
awesome.
she did I'm Telling You on
She has such range.
oh, and phenomenal.
You would know, as you are an amazing musician yourself. So any kind of comment about a musician coming from you, I would respect. So you all should listen to whomever he just spoke. What was her name again? Amber Whom?
Amber Riley.
Amber Riley.
Yeah. So if you don't know, and thank you
Find
for
out.
calling me a musician. I call it crying and playing Whitney Houston songs at super slow speed and working out my issues in front of others. But tomato.
That might apply to all creatives, don't you think, perhaps?
That is. And what's making you happy over there?
Yeah, tell us.
Yes. What's making me happy is that it is sweater weather and I can wear layers again, because Lord knows that I am a layer fiend. I love clothes and wearing all the different layers of them, wearing, I think the most I've ever had on was maybe 5 to 6 layers of clothing.
Holy wow.
And you could see all the pieces, like, it's a science, it's a gift.
And fashion sense have you. That is exactly
That's
correct.
true.
I try.
I am very envious of your fashion sense, since I have none.
Yeah. I try.
Oh, these fit. That's what I call fashion sense.
These fit and they're clean. We're gonna go with that.
Exactly.
So that it's the weather is finally changing, and also being able to just kind of curl up at home and spend my weekends at home and just catch up on some movies, some television, and not feel like I need to be out in the streets all the time, like my mother would say, like, you're always out in them streets and run in the streets. That's what she would say. You always have to be out there running the street. I'm like, Mom, what do you think I'm doing? I'm just hanging out with friends. But no, I love being at this point in my life where I'm feeling like there's not this fear of missing out. The FOMO is slowly going away. There's moments where, like, on Friday night, I feel like I need to be somewhere. But Saturday night, I am completely content with being at home, curled up, popping some popcorn, and watching what I want to watch without anyone bothering me. So
Interesting.
that is what's making me happy.
Also, it's great.
So let's get into our porch sitting, our topic of the evening, and that topic is forgiveness. What a concept. So I started thinking a lot about forgiveness from a conversation that you and I had, Mary, once a few weeks ago about, forgiving someone. Like I remember asking you about, like, hey, how are you able to talk to that person after everything? And you said, I forgave them. And it hit me like a ton of bricks of like, wow, I have not done that. I'm still, struggling in, with my situation because I have not done that. I thought removing myself from the situation would just be all that I needed, and no, that obviously was not. And after that conversation, that theme of forgiveness kept coming up in other interesting ways. And I think last week I was talking about what was making me happy was this this movie called The Meyerowitz Stories. That's on Netflix.
Oh, that's amazing.
You watched it?
I did.
Yeah. I think like that next weekend I watched it. It was at not last weekend because I was crazy, but the weekend before that, I was just watching all kinds of movies, and I love that style because he was the director Noam Noah Baumbach was also a writer for The Royal Tenenbaums, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And so I like that pacing.
Yes.
And so there's a piece in that story. For I won't give it away for those that are planning on watching it, but there's a piece in that story about forgiveness, and that had more to do with like forgiveness of parents and that sort of thing. But it just the way that it came about was just really, I don't know, awe inspiring. And so the next week I was posting on Facebook like, "Hey, so about this forgiveness business, how do you get there?" And so I kind of wanted to talk to you about how you have been. I've watched you, I've known you for a number of years, and I've watched you kind of go through this renaissance. You're becoming, I feel like, who you're supposed to be. And I think a lot of that had to do with you being able to forgive, was that you were already on this journey. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, just your journey and how you got to where you're here, which, I mean, we're always a work in progress, but, let's at least, celebrate the victories that we do have.
That's awesome. Well, a really long time ago, a good friend of mine introduced me to an author by the name of Louise Hay. Either of you heard of her?
Yes, she put me to sleep a few times by telling me to feel different parts of my body and breathe.
Exactly. And it was the first time that I saw the concept of what we think in our brain is what we make happen. It's not the other way around. It's not what happens influences our thoughts. Our thoughts influence what happens. And it was a radical concept to me. It literally threw me. Yet it felt so familiar. It was odd. I was like, oh, that's it. Okay. Because I'm a thinker, an overthinker. Matt and I have these conversations, and I know you and I have as well as Desiree. I sometimes just think, because that's how I'm made. However, that creates your reality. And she told me, I was listening to a tape. She had tapes, y'all, cassettes. Cassettes. I know, I said it. I was listening to a cassette, hitting the button, pausing and stop. And she had this great saying, and it was this: would you go into yesterday's garbage to make today's meal? Oh. And I went, well, gross. Of course. I mean, oh. That's exactly what went. I mean, I've contemplated going and getting the cookies that I've thrown into the garbage because I don't want to eat them out, but I've never actually done that. Thank the goodness. I've thought about it though, but I wouldn't do it for my food today. If I wanted a fresh salad, which I love to eat every day, I'm not going to go and get yesterday's salad that I threw over into the garbage. And that said to me, okay, you have got to start living in the moment, in the present. A whole lot easier said than done, but aim for that. And those thoughts just kept coming over and over in my mind. Live in the present, live in the present. And then I realized the only way living in my head was me. And if I was angry at Matt because, may I tell a story about Matt? Matt comes and hangs out at my house. And sometimes he leaves some things at my house. And I'm fine with that. But sometimes they're in my way. So I said to him one day, I'm like, look, I'm glad that you're here, but could you take those things with you when you leave? Because it's annoying me. And he was like, well, of course. Thank you for saying something. My point being, I could have sat and been mad at Matt and been irritated at Matt and thought, I can't believe he did that. But Matt's not in my head. Matt wasn't feeling any of those feelings that I was having. So I had to say, okay, well, forget it. He didn't do it on purpose, and say to him, please don't leave that stuff in my house.
And in fact, I said how simple it is to communicate if you will just take the time to do so and not let something fester and not let something become a bigger issue than it is and things start falling apart or passive aggressive behaviors or,
all of those things.
All the things that can happen in any relationship, just for the simple thing to say, I'm going to feel this, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to be willing to accept it and say, thank you for doing so. And let's find a slightly new way forward that makes it better for everybody. 100%. How simple and how easy, and yet how infrequent we sometimes see that in our lives.
So it reminds me of an article that has been, it's an older article, but it gets circulated at least every year from somebody because it'll be reprinted in a different medium or whatever. And it talks about unmet expectations. And so what you're talking about is just communication. a lot of times we don't communicate what our expectations are, but then also it's about the balance of expectation versus reality of like what's going on, assessing what's actually happening, and then acting accordingly, not just sitting there, you know, being idle in that expectation. It's like, okay, let me make a movement on this.
Exactly. Or falling into assumptions because of that expectation.
Yeah.
And we all know what happens with the assumptions.
Yes.
Yeah.
But a little communication goes a long way.
It goes a long way in all things. And so, in the case of that small little moment between Matt and I, that wasn't something that I needed to quote unquote forgive him for doing something because he didn't know it. But the premise is still the same. Staying in that place and realizing when you have anger in your heart, thoughts, minds, or resentment, or whatever it is, you're the only one feeling it.
Yep.
You're the only one feeling it. So forgiveness is a natural step from that. Now, are we, of course, going to get into the conversation where people say, well, you don't know, they were abusive to me. Well, of course, things like that happen. We all know someone who had a child that was murdered, and that person decided to forgive the murderer of his child. Yeah, that's pretty intense, but why? Because that person was, again, feeling those thoughts. You can't, it's counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. Being angry and holding on to resentment and all those thoughts when they don't feel them.
Yeah.
Especially if it's somebody that you don't even see anymore because of whatever happened between you, whatever the case may be. Or someone, in the case that in Desiree and I were talking that might have stopped, it was someone that she only sees on an occasional basis anymore, perhaps on purpose, just to give a little space. But even more, if you're not seeing that person, you can't express your feelings toward them, and you can't do it. So you just got to let it go. Forgive them. Maybe it's forgiving the word. That just kind of occurred to me right now. The word itself, I don't know. You hear what I'm saying? Like maybe it's a little wimpy. You forgave, or you forgive and forget. Well, no one's telling you to forget. You're just saying, don't let it eat at you.
Yeah. And I host a feminist drinking discussion group, and this was a topic as well because, I love to dive deep on things. And something came up about the idea of, like, does everything need to have that label of forgiveness? Like, what about just being doneness?
Right.
In a situation where it's not necessarily about forgiving, it's more like you come to that point where you're done. You're done feeling that way. Whether it's regarding yourself, a situation, or, something that keeps reoccurring, you get to this point where you're just dumb. You're just done. And I think a lot of people get hung up on the term forgive and forgiveness.
Isn't it? And it's funny that you all had that conversation. I actually did not want to come there last night because I didn't want to influence my thoughts today. I actually on purpose didn't come, so I'm glad you brought it up. But it's interesting. I never thought of that till right now at this moment. Maybe it's the word forgiveness. If you can find a different way to say it. Does that word bring up something in you, Matt?
I don't sense a weakness in it. Personally, but I'm a person who tends to try to strike a balance and think about how everything I do or say is going to affect others, probably before myself. So, I mean, what is forgiveness? And I think it's a letting go of something. And I think maybe on the surface, the knee-jerk reaction is there's a weakness to it, but realistically, I think we'd all probably agree that long term there's a strength because you were willing to do that and to forgive. And like you said, Desiree, it could be I'm forgiving myself. It could be I'm forgiving someone else, but I'm done feeling. What a good point. Yeah. Aren't you always done with something before you forgive? Aren't you always aren't you done with something and letting something go that's negative? And aren't you always healed from that?
Yes. Most of the times.
Yes.
But then, like, something that I run into is that notion of, am I just running away? You know, like sometimes when I think about options and like decisions that I make, and then after the fact, I wonder, like, was I just running away from something? And then if you run away from something, you know, it's just going to follow you, right? And so, what's the difference between being done and then just, you know, giving up and running away? You know, did you really work through it? So that was the question why I posted it was like, you know, what are some tips? What are some concrete actions on getting to that place of forgiveness or doneness? And a lot of times it has to do with your own internal, you know, I don't want to say soul searching, but you know, in some situations, like let's say like with like, you know, relationships with friendships or dating or whatever, any kind of ship, you know, it's too
Any kind of ship. That's
Any
funny.
kind of
I'm
ship.
stealing that right there.
well that was coined by some friends of mine in Vegas. We'd always just call it your ship because we never knew, like, I don't know how y'all are defining what y'all are doing. I'm just gonna call it your ship. Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you, friends in Vegas, for calling that. That is so amazing.
Yeah, that was from the unit. That was the unit. Shout out to the unit. But anyways, like owning up to your part in whatever happened. You know, what was your role in it? You know? So then sitting in that, realizing it, and then coming up with, okay, so what do I do now? How do I learn from that now?
Yeah. You know, very good point. What you said about, am I running away from it? You know what? So what if you are? How about that?
Well,
of course, that doesn't mean it's not following you. You raise an excellent point. And I'm certainly not saying that you don't stick your head in the sand and ignore that fact, but sometimes you just have to run away from things. Sometimes I equate it to the, if a animal gets its paw caught in a trap and it gnaws its paw off to get out, it survived.
yeah.
Sometimes you have to just do that to survive. One hopes, if you're the type of person that is conscious of yourself and is into self-reflection, you may run away and then say, okay, let me talk about why I ran away. I ran away for self-preservation, but let's not just that be a pattern of that. That's hard to achieve sometimes. But so what if you ran away? What's the worst? That's not the worst thing in the world. You got to gnaw your foot off sometimes. That's the way it works.
Yeah. Matt, you're reading a book that kind of touches on some of this from an author's perspective of his own life.
Right. And he talks about the relationship that he had with the stormy relationship he had with his father. And
what book and author is this?
It's Rick Bragg, All Over But the Shoutin'.
He loves Rick Bragg.
I do.
I believe he's from his hometown.
That is correct. We share a hometown, and I'm extremely proud of that. And
that might be in what state?
That might be in Alabama.
Oh, I knew I had to say that.
Greatest state in the union. Thanks for mentioning.
Go ahead.
Also, great football team. Don't know if you've heard, but and have some very erudite people. I'm not necessarily putting myself in that number, but Rick Bragg certainly is. And he wrote that his father, who was absent and abusive in the short periods of time that he was there, and he said, "I'm stuck somewhere between understanding and forgiveness," and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, and there between understanding and forgiveness is a wall too wide to get around. So I don't think he could understand and yet can't quite get to forgiveness is what he said. And, that's where he was when he wrote that. And that was in the 90s. So, 20 years later, who knows how he's evolved and where he's at on that. But you all talk about some things that gnawing your foot off. I tend to take a softer lens, I think, on life sometimes. But I say the old cliche is when you move, whether that's literally or figuratively, whether that's a place or a relationship, you always unpack the same things that you pack up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, the difference in listening to us talk is just don't pack it up. And that's what the forgiveness is. Maybe you have to move, but don't pack that particular piece.
Take that shit to Goodwill. Leave it. Donate it. Someone else can pick it up.
That's on Orange Tag Thursday or whatever goes on. Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, you're right. Don't bring it with you.
Don't bring it with you.
I like that. That's great. I really like that analogy.
Yeah.
Because that is part of moving. Obviously, the purging,
Yeah.
And in some of the articles that I was researching to try to, because again, I'm very much like an action oriented. I love talking and pontificating and all that, but I want an outcome. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for something that kind of gave some steps or at least some guidelines into some things that you can do. And I ran across this article that talked about how one of the steps was, reframing that narrative, taking the I'm a victim out of it and turning it yourself into, okay, so I went through that and I came out on the other side.
Yes.
Almost like your Shawshank Redemption, moment where you literally climb through shit and you come out on the other side victorious, covered in shit.
Yeah.
But you can shower and you made it. You made it to the other side. And so that's what it's all about. Like, that part of life is about, finding a way to get to that other side of whatever is ailing you, whatever is hurting you. Don't sit there in that hurt. Don't sit there in that victimhood. And so I love that idea of, okay, is this a part of your narrative? Or are you keeping this whole idea of I'm a victim because of this, that, and the other? And is that more because it plays into your narrative? Or are you ready to get rid of that narrative and move past and grow and all that kind of stuff?
It's not easy. You talked about ships. I'm going to say that. You talk about ships. And, there's a famous saying, every ship is 50-50. No, every ship is 100%, 100%. We're all 100% responsible for what we do.
Yep.
However, this is something I read somewhere, and it may have been, I don't know where, but I think you have to understand that every one of us, including ourselves, are doing the best we can at that very moment. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes my best is amazing, and other times my best is I showered this morning. And you just got to be a little okay with yourself on those days. But most people are not intentionally hurting you.
Yeah.
Most people don't even think about you. They spend all their time thinking about themselves. They're really not thinking about you, whoever the you is.
Because what are you thinking about? Yourself.
Exactly. And if you can pull away from that and go, oh, that look had nothing to do with me. It meant that they just realized that they forgot that their curling iron was on, and it wasn't what I said to them or how I looked at them. But it's very easy for us to fall into that self place.
Yes.
Because again, our thoughts, we're the only one in charge of the thoughts inside of our head. Des, I want to say one thing about that article you sent us. This was really interesting. I wrote this quote down. Let go of the sting and release the bitterness, but hang on to the wisdom. I'm not sure who wrote that, but it was an article that Desiree sent around. I think it was in some of those groups.
I'll post it in the show notes.
Oh, yay. She'll post it in the show notes. Awesome. Isn't that interesting? Let go of the sting.
That to me is a more eloquent and thorough way of saying forgive and forget.
Mm-hmm.
Or forgive but don't forget, I should say.
Release the bitterness, but hang on to the wisdom.
Because if you forget, then you've lost the wisdom.
Exactly.
But when you forgive, you let go of the sting. And that, because you hear the phrase forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. But if you forget, then you didn't learn anything.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So forgive, let go of the bitterness, become the hero of your own story. But don't forget, because you learned something in that process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. About yourself or about someone else.
Right.
Or how you want to be treated or how you want to treat others. The wisdom could be anything.
And you touched on something very important about how when a person reacts to negative, like you're in the office or something, or, you're at a family function and someone has a reaction to something that you feel is, it's a little uncalled for, or maybe even out of character over something that's minute as, I don't know, like, fixing yourself a plate at the family reunion and the way that you were ladling your barbecue on your plate just really, I don't know, got under their skin or something. They said something, I don't know. But a lot of the times that has nothing to do with you. It has more to do with what's going on in their head, a moment that they just had. And something that one of the women brought up in our group discussion was that how, it's this cyclical thing where the what is it? Paying it forward, right?
Yes.
There's that whole thing. Like sometimes you'll roll up to Starbucks and the person ahead of you pay for your drinks and then you pay for the person behind you, that sort of thing. Well, that happens in these situations where the negative effect is that, someone pissed you off. So then like you're driving, someone cut you off. So then you cut off the next person and then they snap at their co-worker at work, and then they end up snapping at their child who call, and it's just this cyclical thing. And it's if one person could have stepped back and said, whoa, this obviously isn't aimed at me, and then stopped that cycle, so that way it didn't continue to
See,
affect.
also the polarization of America and lack of political discourse.
Yay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I think about, driving is a thing for me. I tend to be a little, I want people to behave properly, quote unquote, whatever that means when one is driving. And so
You would like for people to know what the hell they're doing.
I would like for people to know what the hell they're doing. So recently somebody rolled a stop sign and I was like, oh, I can't believe it. And I went, girl, how many times have you rolled a stop sign? Get over yourself. They're in a rush. It had nothing to do with you. What are you going to be irritated by the fact that person, it's not your world to police. They rolled the stop sign. They were in a hurry, or they were distracted, or maybe their mother just died and they're trying to get to the funeral home. Give them a break and stop judging them and just stop at the stop sign yourself and go on.
And also stop looking at it as a slight towards you. Right, like another piece of that narrative that the world is out to get you. Right. Like, honey, ain't nobody thinking about you.
No,
they're not.
No one's thinking about you.
Absolutely not thinking about you.
You just made me think of my general coping mechanism while driving.
Which is?
I just assume no one knows what they're doing. And when they do it properly, I'm just pleasantly surprised. And I never realized that about myself until just now. I just assume everyone's going to, come across the line and kill me. And when they don't, I'm like, oh my God, I made it home. So that's interesting. Thank you for bringing that out. That's fascinating.
It is
I didn't know. Yeah. But you're right. And like you said, nobody's thinking about you.
No.
Anyway.
And I've worked in retail for so many years. This is something that we tell ourselves and preach to others. You don't know what's going on. People come in and they're crazy about their issue or their thing. And then sometimes you think, I hate them. I don't understand them. They're completely insane. And then you find out, yes, the mother just died. My husband just died, whatever the situation is. And then you become a lot more compassionate all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. How much better it would be if we just started with that compassion?
Yes.
In the unknown, and then worked our way towards that, and how much more productive might that be?
I think just kind of approaching people with, that saying that, you hear a lot, like, you never know what battle another person is, fighting.
Very
If we could just, I don't know, be nice, be decent to each other, which is hard because we're all dealing with our own stuff too, but let's, I don't know, like, check that shit at the door. Like, especially if you're in a like a place of work or just a place of service, try to do that. Try to take yourself out of the equation because again, it's not about us. It's about just trying to navigate and be a decent person. Everyone.
Okay, true story.
Which is hard because some people I feel like don't deserve it.
No,
and maybe they don't. But once again, what do we know? And I
true.
know there have been days that I have not deserved people to be nice to me. I mean, I 100% know that.
Yeah, I've been trashed some days.
And this whole conversation about forgiveness still has so many different elements, and we all have our own personal examples of how we've been successful and not at that. Maybe been forgiven where we didn't feel like we deserved it, but what precedes forgiveness a lot of times is I'm sorry. And I think in a lot of relationships that seems or ships, I should say, that seems so simple to say, I'm sorry. And then the other person say, I forgive you. But I think we presume that a lot of the time, and it does, and sometimes in long-term ships, we'd never learn to say those things to each other and to ask for forgiveness and then have it be granted. But when you can do that, how powerful and productive can that be?
Yeah.
Again, back to your the thing that just left my head, so I don't know. Because I looked over at him and went, what did he say?
Right. What
went right out.
What happened?
That happens.
What happened was
I talk in circles. It's okay. That happens a lot.
Well, here's a question. This was brought up last night in that discussion that I thought was really intriguing. And, a lot of times when you talk about forgiveness, you come from a place of like the times that you've been wronged and, how do I deal with that? But it's like, okay, well, what about the times that you have wronged someone else? How do you handle that? And it's taken some time, and Lord knows my mother may not agree that I do this, but admitting when you're wrong, right? Or being able to sit in your wrongness. The first time that I experienced this was probably like my first relationship. This was like, 10 years or so ago. And, I was dating this woman and, things went awry. And she was upset with me for something that I did. And instead of me like going off and be like, about it, I was just like, yeah, okay, you are deserving and allowed to be mad at me in this moment, and I will sit in it and I will take it. I mean, she wasn't, crazy or abusive about it, but it was like, okay, I'm not going to fight back because I was in the wrong in that situation. And then hopefully we can come around and talk in the future and like, build a friendship after that. But in the meantime, I am going to accept the fact that and recognize the fact that I did mess up in this way and you were upset about it and you have every right to be upset about it. And I'm not going to try to tell you that you're not. I'm not going to gaslight you, And so and the fact that I was like, God, I was 12 back then. But the fact that I came to that realization, I don't even know where I learned that from, but I've tried to carry that throughout. Like any ship that has ended, I always look at, okay, what was my role in the spiral that happened there, and then own it. And if it was, mostly my fault, I sit in that, I let that person be mad at me. There was only one time that I did kind of lash out. And I never really got to apologize for lashing out for that. And so that I kind of, have to still sit with that. And I'll never see that person. We live on different sides of the country. But I've always tried to at least give that person that time to feel the hurt that I caused them. So have you ever experienced something where, like, how have you handled the moment where you're the one that messed up?
Shall I volleyball
No one,
that
no
to
one
you?
wants to go first.
Or which one is that? We're both eyeing each other, y'all. I wish you could see us go.
You're the special guest. I'm going to defer to you.
I find I'm more critical of myself than I am of others. And I probably could find instances because, wait, I'm not perfect. Oh, right. Okay. With other people, but I think a lot of that really comes with my own self. I am extremely hard on myself and extremely judgmental of myself. And it's hard to say, okay, you just did something hurtful to your own self. Yeah, of course that's happened. But okay, how are you going to forgive yourself? And it's tough. I just recently had an experience where I sort of got hoodwinked is probably not the right word, but I was trying to do the right thing and someone sort of took advantage of me. And in my attempt to do the right thing, they then took advantage of somebody else. And it was really rough. I had to really forgive myself for letting myself do that. And that was hard. I sat in that pain for 2 or 3 days and it was unpleasant. Ugh. But
once you do that, it subsides a lot faster than you denying it for
100%,
forever.
100%. Because what am I going to do? I mean, yeah, sure, I did not quite do the right thing, and yes, someone didn't do the right thing to me. But I am a grown-ass woman with my own mind and my own thoughts, and I could have done A instead of what I did with B. But what? I don't know. That day, that was the best I had. The best I had that day. And if I keep saying that to myself, okay, that wasn't really cool of me, but you know what? That's all I could do that day. Yeah. Try to make amends with that other person. And in this case, I did try to make amends with the other person. They weren't having any of it. I mean, we're not having any of it. In this case, even threatened legal action, believe it or not. Yeah. And Yep. Just still working on that one a little. It's still a little painful, but I feel better about it because I know that I did not on purpose with absolute forethought in my mind say, I'm going to do you wrong. Yeah. That was not my intent. And that makes it a little easier. Doesn't mean doesn't make it worse for that person. But in my own self, I'm like, okay, I didn't purposely do that. Give yourself a break.
But I hate when people just approach it with just righteous indignation, like they did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And they walk around acting like, someone brought up the story of how, like, someone wronged them. But then they finally got the courage to approach that person and mention it to them. Like, hey, you made me feel this way when you did this, like, like almost like, what are you going to do about it? And that person responded with, God has forgiven me. That's the same reaction I had. I was like, okay.
Well, divine intervention in that case, so that's the thing.
Right. So then you wonder, like, do you understand, what, like, do you have remorse? Like, it's almost like the person doesn't have remorse. It's like, I did this thing, allegedly God, forgives me, so I'm going to go about my life. I'm not going to, give you any kind of answer or, solace about it at all. And it's like, you know what? Fuck you, man.
Yeah. That's a tough one. I don't know. Ball's in your court. You go.
Your turn, man.
Well, I think that you just said remorse, and I think that's a great word, and that's it. When you wrong someone, you feel that remorse, but some people will take that and turn that inside out and lash out at someone else. And like you said, it's unpleasant to think, even whether it was done to you or whatever, but especially when you do something to wrong someone else, it's unpleasant to admit that. But then you do, and then we go back to the simple act of, and I'm sorry. And if that other person can, they say, I forgive you. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't end there. Then you do what a friend told me recently, and that is, and then you act in consequence, because the best way to say that you're sorry is to change your future behavior. Mm-hmm. So you say, I did the wrong thing. They say, I release the burden of that so you don't have to feel that way, even though you did hurt me. And then you change your behavior, and then you find a better way forward. And therein lies forgiveness, and therein lies productivity, and therein lies communication. Mm. Perfect world scenario, but the more we can strive towards that, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah. Oh.
Such a tough subject.
File that under easier said than done.
Easier said than done. I also came with some more quotes. This is a quote from Louise Hay. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Because that's forgiving lets it go. If you can forgive someone's behavior, again, not condoning their behavior, and perhaps not choosing to put yourself into a situation where that behavior is going to hurt you again. What? So I'm going to hold on to it because I was right and they were wrong. And again, they're not inside my head. They're not feeling any of that. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And I think the path of letting go, forgiving, whatever we want to call it, being done, the doneness, being doneness is about being happy.
And the idea that someone is taking space up in your head and not paying rent.
Ooh. Oh, man.
But then you would rather be happy than right. So you give that forgiveness, but then you give that person trust that they won't do that to you again. And they're going to, again, act in consequence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then if they do it again, then I think we're into that fool me twice, shame on me situation.
Yeah. Right.
Or like when Maya Angelou said, like, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Believe them. Oh, indeed. It's tough, though. When you love someone, you want
to think that they would do the best.
You do. And
you'd like to think that their best is better than it actually is.
Mm-hmm. And it's tough. It's tough. Matt and I've had this conversation, and I think you and I have too as well, Desiree. This year I've spent a lot of time saying to myself, it is, okay, so let's say I'm in a situation and I know that driver should not roll that stop sign because that is unsafe. and they might hurt someone. But you know what? It's arrogant of me to assume to deny that person their own lesson. Perhaps they need to get into an accident to learn their lesson. I don't know that. It's not my life. It's not what I'm living. And when I assume, well, you didn't listen to me and that's why this happened. Or if you'd only just done that, I told you that's how that was going to be. Golly, what? No. Learn your own lesson. I'm going to stay over here. Yeah. Over here in my own self, because I got my own lessons to learn. It's extremely, personally, I'm not speaking about anyone else. It's arrogant of me to assume and that one thing and to deny someone else their lesson. And that comes back to forgiveness again. If I can let it go and go, okay, that's hard. I don't like that behavior of theirs, but I'm going to forgive them and let it go and let them learn their own lesson.
Yeah. And there's that whole feeling of if you can walk through your day-to-day life and situations and realize that, yeah, someone else is dealing with something, and if they, come at you wrong, or if they have this recurring way of reacting to things, it's more like, okay, it's beyond me feeling like you are attacking me. It's more like, okay, now I pity you because you are obviously stuck on this little mouse trap that you just keep running around. And I'm like, okay, so I am no longer going to see this big, negative front against me. It's more like I feel sorry for you. So then it humanizes that person. And it almost, I don't know, in some instances, you when they come at you that way, you can kind of like laugh it off because it's like, oh, honey.
Bless
it. You
bless it.
You don't
and
even,
if you're not Southern and all listen to this, that
honey.
It really means fuck you.
Like you're struggling so much that you don't even know what you're struggling with, and so I'm just gonna walk away because that's you. That's your struggle. You're not. I'm not gonna take your struggle on and add it to my narrative. I'm just not.
Yep.
Bye, baby.
Exactly.
Bye.
Bye. Not into it.
They're wounded. And they're reacting from a wounded way. And I really wish they weren't acting this way, but what are you going to do? I mean, keep banging your head against the wall and expect them to do this when they are what's the fish in the tree? Judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree? I'm missing that saying. Is that something like that? Like, they can't.
Yeah.
In this case, this particular person cannot. And so I'm going to just keep being mad at them when, again, I'm mad at the fish because the fish can't climb the tree.
Yeah.
That's not fair to the fish.
In the article that I read, and we're not talking about necessarily abusive behavior per se, and that can take different levels and forms, but it said something to the effect of many abusive people were abused themselves, and therefore they are already acting with a deficit.
Oh, completely.
Mm-hmm.
They're already acting with a deficit. What a beautiful phrase.
Right. And there's an example where someone is probably not asking for forgiveness, and yet you have to give it and walk away from it better because you've released something. And what else? You've no longer given them power over you.
Yes.
As importantly as anything. That's why it's empowering, because they no longer occupy the space without rent. They no longer have the emotional power over you. You have released that and said, I choose to be a higher self, to find something deeper, to find something better, and to release that and focus on the positive.
Yeah. Focus on what brings you happiness in the other parts of your life.
And spend that time and energy on people who bring you that positivity and who don't choose to treat you that way.
I mean, and that's a part of it too, is like, how do you spend your energy? Energy is a currency. Time is the most important currency because we're not, granted all the time in the world. And so it's almost like, guarding your time with, every piece of your being. Like I've really, honed in on that in, the last year where I only spend my time on the things that I want to spend my time on the people that reciprocate that energy. And it's, this, I don't want to say like mutually beneficial, but, I want to pour into cups that are going to pour back, because if you keep pouring into that glass and it never pours back into you, well, guess what? You're going to end up empty and thirsty and thinking like, girl, what's wrong with my water?
I heard something I don't remember which, another podcast or something, but they talked about some people are like a bucket with a hole in the bottom. And so you can keep pouring and pouring and pouring, but no matter how much you give, it will always leak out.
Yeah.
And they'll wind up draining you. And you talk about spending time and energy in a positive way because you are expending energy. Have I worked Dolly Parton into every podcast so far? Because I don't want to fail to do so. So, because I was just at the beach.
Come full circle, baby. Come full circle.
I was just at the beach and reading her book. And, she and Kenny are doing a thing tonight in Nashville.
Yeah, I'm really surprised you're not there.
I know, but my father is. So the world's a little upside down. But she talks about it takes a lot of misery, or it takes a lot of energy, rather, to be happy. And it takes a lot of energy to be miserable. You're expending energy either way.
Yeah.
Which way do you want to put it towards? Because you're going to expend the energy either way. Put it towards positive things and look for things that don't drain you and things that give you back reciprocal, positive energy.
Yes.
Awesome.
Are there any other notes that you want to...
Oh, she knows. She sees that I have my notes in front of me. Also, when Des posted that on Facebook and, asked for how y'all work through that. And there's some really great, I wish we kind of had that in front of us. Maybe I'll pull it up in a few minutes, and she may be getting it up right now because there's really some great ideas on that. But one of the things I posted was forgive and just keep forgiving. And again, back to my sweet Louise Hay, she says, you don't have to know how to forgive. You just have to be willing to forgive.
Yeah.
Just be willing and just keep saying it, fake it till you make it, be willing to forgive and just say, okay, I got to let that go. I got to forgive and move on. I don't know how, but I'm willing.
And I think that's the hang up for people, is that they don't allow themselves to get to that point where they're ready to forgive. I remember the first time I ever thought about forgiveness was, with my mother. Like, she was telling me how she forgave someone. I was asking her, and we were talking about it after the fact that the person had passed, and we were just kind of talking about, I'm like, wow, that was like, my mother is everything, by the way.
She's a heck of a mama. I've met her.
And a lot of the way that I live my life is because of things that my mom has just always told me. She has always been wise, and it's because she had to be. She didn't necessarily have that person that was teaching her these things. She just kind of figured it out on herself and then passed it on to, her children. And so, the first time that I was really experiencing watching someone forgive another person was her. Watching her forgive this person that had hurt her. And, I never actually even released it, come to think of it. My mom was like, I, forgave her, and, I moved on. And, my mom has a very strong, faith, she's very, faith in Christianity. And that's, what has been, her strength and, getting all the things that going through all the things that she's gone through. And I know she would love for me to find me a church home, but I don't know. I'm just not there yet, and I'm not sure if I ever will. I try to find it in other ways, I guess. But anyways, seeing her be able to forgive a person let me know early on that it's possible. And that, who the hell am I to just sit here and hold on to something for forever? But do what you got to do because family, and so I try to take that with me, in that people that are my actual blood family, and then also people that feel like family, I try to reciprocate that love that I know is important, and it's all about family and treating each other like you are family. If you can, some people don't necessarily deserve that. But yeah, that was my first time thinking about really what forgiveness meant and how do you get there. And so with her, it was through her faith. And so I was interested in what are some other ways to get there.
I wrote, I didn't know what I said. Isn't that something? Start forgiving and keep forgiving, even if you don't feel like anything is happening. It is. Forgiving someone helps you draw in peace, even if you don't formally tell them.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be this whole big... Forgiveness doesn't need to be a production.
No.
Forgiveness is internal. It's for you. It's not for the other person. It's for you. It's for you to find a way to move on, to move past it. And whether or not you tell that person, like, oh, I forgive you. Because if you do, a lot of times if you tell that person, they're going to be like, girl, what? I didn't do anything to you. And then it becomes this whole other, piece of the puzzle. And who wants that? But forgiveness is for yourself. It's not about the other person. It's about you and you choosing to find happiness for yourself and not sit in pain and sit in victimhood forever.
Mm-hmm. Someone said, it's not always even forgiveness exactly. It's like I just wake up one morning and find I no longer care. I think that's your being done, Des, right?
Done.
Done.
Done. I don't care anymore.
Done.
Honey, Linda, baby, what is going on? Do you have one for this week, Matt?
My honey goes to the phony king of England, President Trump, and our political system in general. And waking up every morning, I have like 17 news apps. So anytime someone says anything, my phone lights up. And invariably every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is pull down the drop-down curtain and start removing notifications because I have the OCD and what have you. And this morning they were back into a Twitter war. Corker and Trump specifically, and Senator Flake said he wouldn't be running again and had that scathing message to our president, air quotes. But anyway, not to get too political, but just to say, here we are talking about a conversation about being willing to say, I'm sorry, listen to each other, forgive, learn, move on, be positive, put our energy into the right things. And the people to whom we, in theory, look up to most hide behind the most asinine version of screen courage and go back and forth at each other in a way that does nothing to promote dialogue and instead just promotes the opposite of discourse and understanding and looks for ways to polarize and blame and name call. And so, not to be overly political, but that was when I considered my honey, what are you doing? That was it. You're supposed to be modeling and leading the way and giving examples for the rest of us, and you're doing the exact opposite that we would tell little tweens and teenagers to be better than. Mm-hmm. Not to be overly serious. I wish it was something about hangnails or pop radio, but I'm not that cool.
Hangnails.
What could be a pet peeve about hangnails? That they exist?
Yes, because I'm desperately in need of a manicure.
That they're not cut off? That you don't have the proper scissors?
Mm-hmm. Are you not on your weekly visit schedule?
I stopped getting the high gloss. Getting us to dive into some like super serious topics. And so it's
the show.
I do, right, because I played a farmer from the 40s and I thought they really weren't into gel polish. So in addition to my straw hat and Liberty overalls, I gave up a super, important part of myself, and that was, a base coat and and a top coat for that matter. So I've stopped getting them done less frequently, and there are cuticles everywhere, and I'm a biter, and I have to do something about myself. And I promise you, Desiree, I will do it before the next one.
Okay, because
important. I know
because I can't look at that any longer.
Because I've been trying to hide my hands under the table most of the time.
It's all I've been able to see.
May I ask your forgiveness?
You have my forgiveness for not going back to get your manicure.
And I will act in consequence and have a manicure next
thank
time.
You
and
so
we will
much.
move forward together. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Mary, do you have one for this week?
I do. I mean, really, if I left it on the sink to the left of the sink and you borrow it and you put it back on the right of the sink, how complicated is this? Happens to me all the time. You borrow my stapler? Put it back where I had it. You wanna... Those are my tea bags. I left those tea bags there for a reason. Don't throw them away.
Yes.
Those are my pet peeves.
Stop touching my stuff.
Don't stop touching my stuff. Don't sit in my chair. That's my chair. Don't sit in that chair and look at me and go, ha ha ha. You hate it when I sit in your chair, don't you? Yes, actually, I do. Get your ass out of my chair. Yeah, that's my
Bye.
pet peeve. Stop touching my things. And if you touch my things, please use your courtesy and good manners to put them back where they were.
Next week on The World of Virgos.
Yeah, that's it right there.
As a fellow Virgo, I get it.
That's my pet peeve. What's yours, Des?
My honey. Listen, Linda, baby. Why are you driving?
I wish y'all could see her when she said that.
Why are you driving slow in the passing lane? Why? I mean, everyone deals with it.
Mm-hmm.
And but here's my peeve though. It's not necessarily the fact that people drive slow in the fast lane, which that's a big part of it and it's dangerous and it causes a lot of wrecks, is that when I'm riding with someone and they pull up on the bumper of this person and, the right lane is clear, but they slam on their brakes and then all hate ride their bumper behind them, like thinking that person is going to move and get a clue. And like, obviously they're not going to get a clue. So instead of like messing up my equilibrium by you slamming on the brakes, how about you just go around them and then, maybe cut them off afterwards when you pass them. But again, no slamming on the brakes. So I don't know. I'm very much in the school of thought of whenever I see an obstacle in my way, I don't stop at that obstacle and then get mad at that obstacle. I simply go around it. Okay.
Even if it's in the right lane instead of the left.
Even if it's in the right
it
lane.
makes me so nervous when people tailgate other people.
Yes.
It makes me so nervous.
Like something's going to happen. Go around. Baby, go around.
Or maybe chill out.
Right.
It's okay.
It's
or
okay.
Get there 5 seconds. Don't you love the people who just whiz around you and with all the
with all their passive aggressive
and attitude and whatever, and then you pull up next to them at the stoplight and you're like, oh my God, you got here 10 seconds before me. Oh my God, good for you. Good for you. Good for you. Was that worth almost dying?
How does that
for?
feel?
Right.
How does that feel?
Right. Oh my God, you almost won.
Yeah,
and
almost.
then life made us equal.
And then
What about that? It's the same pet peeve, though. Why don't you just treat people like you'd like to be treated?
There you
How
go.
about that?
Because not everybody's going to do like you want them to do.
No, they're not. It goes back to driving. I can't. Oh, golly.
Do you know in Europe they will ticket you for going too slow in the passing lane? If your rate of overtake is not, even if you're passing, if your rate of overtake is not fast enough, they will pull you over and give you a ticket.
that is a law in Tennessee now. It's a matter of actually, calling people out on it and pull them over, giving them tickets. It doesn't happen as often as it should.
Right.
They're out there like fighting like crime or something. I don't know.
I'm like, if you really want to get your quota up in your tickets, that's what you can do. It's just drive along 40 and pull over people that are driving too damn slow in the the passing lane.
Absolutely true.
Baby, get over. But again,
Honey. Put back my stuff. Honey. Move over.
Move over.
Honey, stop tweeting.
I have a touch of motion sickness. So when you do make that abrupt, stomp on the brake, do you really want this?
And
Think
by the
about
way,
your choices.
If you hit somebody from behind, you're always at fault.
Automatically.
100% of the time.
Mm-hmm. So you choose.
Mm-hmm.
Go around. If the right lane is open, just simply in a timely manner, like what's coming up. Baby boy's going slow as hell in that lane.
Yep.
Get in the other lane, go past them. Mm-hmm. And what I love is so much is when I'm traveling down 40 and there's like a line of people in the left lane and they're all sitting behind this slow person, and then I see how open the right lane is, and then I just simply scoot over and pass them by. I'm like, I wave. I'm like, bye, baby. What are you doing with your life? Look at your life. Look at your choices. Are you really going to sit in this? Like, bye. And then some of them will be like, oh, I don't know, I could do that. And they come over.
People are that oblivious.
Yeah, I'm like, move over. Go around.
That's part of mine, too. The folks who are sitting in the left lane and see 30 cars pass them on the right.
Yes.
Have you noticed there might be something going on here? Nope.
Maybe you're the problem.
But they're not thinking about you. They're only thinking about themselves.
Right.
Go back to earlier part of this podcast.
Yes, they're only thinking about themselves and like, oh, I'm in the right, I'm
They
going.
need to think about getting in the right-hand lane. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, that's all I'm
Apparently,
saying.
there are people who don't know that that's what the rule is.
Yeah.
I talked to someone one time.
That really is it. Some
Genuinely,
people
yeah.
genuinely don't
Someone
know.
don't know. And I was like, the left lane is only for passing.
Oh, really?
What? And I was like, that sign there, you see, it says left lane for passing only. Oh, really?
Yeah. So you traveling in that lane, honey?
Honey.
Read
the signs.
Read. Baby, read. So, all right, that brings us to the close of another couple of Lindas. Thank you, Matt, Mary, my lovely Lindas for the evening.
Thank you, Chief Linda. We're so happy to be here.
Yes, thanks for having us.
The biggest Linda out here with them all. That's nothing. Who knows nothing about life. If you have any things that you would like to talk about, or any suggestions or any questions that you'd like us, Lindas, to help you figure out, send us an email at coupleoflindas@gmail.com. There's also our Facebook page. You can find us at a couple of Lindas. Again, any show ideas or any questions that you have answered, and if you're just really needing somebody to help you with your life, hey, we'll give it a shot. I'm not saying it's going to be a completely successful, but hey, we'll help you out. So, again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on A Couple Lindas.